Hello everyone, and thank you for taking some time to join us today to review our SPDS application. My name is Gabe Gagliardo, Senior Technical Trainer here at Samsung Electronics, and I'll be taking you through a few things about this new and exciting application that we have. So we'll first start with a quick overview of what you can expect to see in this presentation. So we have, if we could just pop over to the PowerPoint there. So our agenda for today is where we can go to get the app and to register. Okay, so we'll do a quick review of that. The connection options that we have, notice the USB on the go is the recommended connection type. Again, I have one here that I can show you and give you a good idea of what you need. Features of the app, as well as using SPDS to troubleshoot, and of course documenting your troubleshooting, right? So this is all little functions and capabilities within the app, and we'll certainly talk about the specifics of these various points as we go through. Now, a few points of note. We can do component tests with this, all right? So we can, this app is essentially a mixture of service mode and GSPN. So we can use this to run our motor tests. We can download service manuals and service bulletins right to your mobile device. We can run color test patterns. So if we need to see single color cyan in a 100% page fill, we can do that now using this application. Again, most of our machines do not offer this in that service mode. Support videos available for select models. Okay, so that's typically for our newer models. And compatibility. Right? So this is compatible with Android smartphones specifically, not tablets as of today, specifically smartphones. And as you see there on that last point, iPhone support is coming later this year, and that will be Wi-Fi only in order to use the app. So in short, there's a lot of really good things that we can do with this. Again, you saw the tests and everything else, but again, it's truly a mixture of service mode that you might have on the machine itself and GSPN. And the great thing is that you don't even need to be connected to a machine to actually use it. So for starters, the type of cable that you really want to use is called a USB on-the-go cable. Now, it might be a little difficult to see on your screen there, but this is what a USB on-the-go cable looks like. So basically, it's a small little micro connection at one end, and then a regular USB connector at the other. So you can find these online for $2 or $3. You might find them for like $5 at certain places, so they're not super expensive. And this is certainly the recommended method to connect. We do have other options. You may have noticed the Wi-Fi Direct and near-field communication, but those connections, as you might imagine, are a little slower. So if you want the most efficient experience, your best bet is to use this USB on-the-go cable. Now, what you also may have noticed is that I have a standard USB cable running over to my machine. Now, the machine I have just off camera to my left, because the machine itself doesn't really matter, because this is going to be compatible with many different machines. Pretty much anything we've made within the last 3 years, and a handful of slightly older models as well. So for you BTA dealers out there, all of our current product will work with this. For our ASCs out there supporting some of our desktop units, again, pretty much anything that you get that is in warranty will be compatible with this SPDS app. So this is a really powerful tool. It's very easy to use, and it's very powerful. Okay, so we're going to take a quick review of this. So let's start by talking about how to get the app onto your phone. So if we could just go to the big screen view of the phone. There we are. Now, what we're looking at here is my smartphone. Again, using ice cream sandwich or better. Ice cream sandwich or better. That's the limitation here. Now, you may notice I already have the app installed in the upper right-hand corner there. But first, I just want to show you how easily you can find it in our App Store. So I'm just going to open up the Play Store, do a quick search. And notice the first item in the list is SPDS, so I'll just simply type that because that's in my history. But if you just type in SPDS, that will come up as well. From there, you simply click on it and install the app as you normally would anything else. And looks like there's an update for the app that just hasn't made it to my phone yet. So we'll certainly make sure that the app is up to date. Now, once the application is installed, the next step is to register yourself. And now I'm just going to open up the SPDS. And you can see that my user credentials are already populated in there. However, where you want to go to register is under that user registration request. So it's the first of those gray buttons towards the bottom of the screen. Now, you're going to need a few things. Mainly, what you're going to need is your partner ID. Now, the partner ID is your Samsung Servicer account number. Okay, so this is your ASC number. So if you're not familiar with what the ASC number is, you can simply contact your service manager or your Samsung regional service manager, and we can certainly approach that, and get you that information. But you will need your Samsung Servicer ID number. Again, this isn't a sales number, it's specifically your service account. And that will then, of course, allow us to grant access because you are an authorized servicer. The ID is just your user ID, so you can call that whatever you wish. Name is just what you think it is, your name, and of course, your email. Now, when you hit OK, that information gets sent over to the site administrator, in which case we will then have to approve your login. Now, once your login is approved and everything is ready to go, and typically the logins get approved fairly quickly, usually within an hour or so, but don't be surprised if from time to time it might take a little bit longer because it is a manual process. It's not an automated process. However, we have been activating these fairly quickly, right? So you can expect a fairly quick response time on that. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. Apparently I have a typo in my password. There we are. Now, what we're seeing here are our three options for connectivity. Well, technically four. So again, we have Wi-Fi Direct. That's the first option. So that obviously requires the device you're trying to connect to have a wireless adapter. So again, that's one option. Using a USB on-the-go cable, that's that middle icon. Again, that's the recommended method. And then finally, we can use this without a connection, right? So we don't have to be connected to a device in order to use the app. And then, of course, you can see the big NFC icon there. So if you have a device that is near-field communication enabled, we can use that as a connectivity option as well. Now, as part of this training, again, I'm going to use the on-the-go cable as the demonstration method. And what I will also do is show you what type of options you have when we are doing a no connection option. So when I choose connect using on-the-go, it's going to ask me, do we want to access the USB device? Because what it's doing is when we connect to the machine, we have a few pieces of data that we collect when we actually exit the app. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. So in this case, I'm going to just hit OK. Again, get in there. Now, this screen that we see here, where it says customer approval, this is going to come up the first time you ever connect to a specific device. So what this is saying is that this particular machine that I am using has never been connected to by somebody who has the SPDS app, meaning the serial number of the machine isn't logged in the system. So that's what this is referring to. Now, in the end, you'll notice that there is in the middle there, we will collect your personal information for device analysis and service. Now, we don't need to fret. That personal information isn't as personal as the message suggests. So really what we're collecting here is the name, company, and email, as you see there. Now, keep in mind that that name, company, and email is going to be whatever you put into it as a technician. So you could basically put your dealer name, you could put the customer name, you could put your own email as the technician in that field. Again, it's however you want that to be loaded. And again, when you, and that information will now be tagged to the serial number of the machine. So now anybody else who connects to the device down the road will automatically see this specific customer information. So in my case, I'm just going to go put in training as the name. Company, I'll just go ahead and put Samsung. And the email, I'll just put in a bogus email address. And of course, don't forget to approve. Now, again, this is not pulling any confidential information from the customer. I have to stress that. Obviously, you have a lot of people out there that are very security conscious, so we are not pulling any financial data or any images or anything like that off of the machine, okay? I want to make sure that that is absolutely clear. The only information that we get is the information that is inputted on that screen that we just had up on the on the phone view. Okay, so I want to make sure that that's absolutely clear. So however you want to track it is up to you as far as that info goes. Now, once I have that in, I can go ahead and hit consent. And now I am connecting to the device. There's no customer agreement. Okay, so that pop-up that you just saw a moment ago where it says there is no customer agreement information, that's just kind of a quick notification that this has never been connected to before. So in this case, this machine is an SL-X 4220RX. So right off the bat, we can see the serial number, we can see the firmware version of the machine, as well as the IP address of the device. Okay, so some decent information right there on the up front, right? Who knows? You may just very well need to do a firmware update. So right as soon as you open up, you can see that. Now, moving along, let's kind of go through all the different functions. So in the upper right-hand corner, you see that little 3-bar icon. That is where we start to do our activities as far as troubleshooting. So the first thing you notice in the list is the error section. Now, what this error section does is allows us to view the errors of the machine, look up errors, look up action for those errors, as well as track some history of some troubleshooting that has been done with the SPDS app. So I'm going to start with lookup device error. Now, in this case, you can see I have 2 error codes there. These are the error codes that are currently present on the machine. Okay, so these are active error codes. So if there was a fuser problem, or an overheating issue, or a paper jam, or whatever it might be, those errors would populate here. Now in this case, this is probably just a paper empty message. So I'm just going to click on one of the error codes. I'm going to click on the H1-1351. And there it is. So in this case, it's a very simple error code. Paper is low in the paper tray. Now, this is, of course, one of the easier errors to fix. You simply put more paper. Now, for some of these error codes, we also have videos and movies, which you can see here show movie. If a movie doesn't exist, the app will tell you. In this case, it looks like we do have some videos for this particular model. And it might be a little difficult to see on this view here, but we can see some load paper in the paper tray. So I can just go ahead and do that. Now, notice it says downloading files. Now, while that downloads, you have to keep in mind that data charges will apply on this. So if you are downloading a video or a service bulletin or a service manual, data charges will be part of the story. So keep that in mind. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing because it's only a one-time download. So once you download a video or a bulletin to your phone, it's there. So it'll be ready to access at any other time moving forward. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. Now, you can also use this through Wi-Fi. So if you're connected to a Wi-Fi connection, we can also use that as well and not affect your data charges. So just want to make sure that that part of it is understood as far as the connectivity aspect of it. And we could certainly potentially even get you some of these videos as well that you can load to the phone. The one thing you want to be careful about is do not move the files that are downloaded. Okay, meaning they download to a specific folder on your phone. So if you move those files out of the folder, the app is going to think that those files don't exist there. And then it will download it again. So again, potentially causing data usage and those kinds of things, right? So I want to make sure that that part of it is clear, and you should be okay. Now, in the end, if we're talking about service manuals and service bulletins, those are typically very small file types, maybe just a couple of meg. So nothing really too intensive as far as data usage. It's those videos that you want to be a little careful about and when you're actually downloading them. But they are pretty helpful. So if we could just go back to the phone view for a second. There we are. And again, it's saying attached file is downloaded. So that means that the file is already there, and now it's going to play that video, which in this case is just going to instruct you on how to install more paper. Right? So, and there's the video. Again, this is going to come in a moment. You know what? This actually isn't streaming on my cast. So, oh, there it is. Okay, you are seeing it. Good. There it is. So that's an example of a video that you can expect to see in the app. Now, it's not limited to just simply, installing paper. There are videos for most error codes, but again, the videos, you can only expect to see those for key product. So you can expect to see them with some of our A3 product, our copiers and things of that nature. Whereas lower-end desktop units, I would not expect to see too many videos on those because of their simplicity. Right? So I want to make sure that that's also clear as far as your expectations. But again, the videos are there, they're handy, and if you happen to be on Wi-Fi, you can go ahead and download all of them as you wish. Now, I'm just going to back out of that video view. So we see the, again, the how to fix the error code. Now, again, that could be any error code. I can even click on this, and I can type in an error code. So let's say it's, I don't know, I'll just type in H2, and I'll just pick 4501. I'll just pick that one. All right. So this is talking about a mailbox error. This is probably with one of our mailbox compatible machines. What you also have to keep in mind, and what this kind of indicates, is that our error codes are fairly standard across our machines as well. So this is why when we type in that error code, it may not necessarily be specific to that unit, but the troubleshooting steps attached to it could span multiple devices. So that's kind of a snapshot on that lookup device error. So you may, again, as I showed you, you can just type in an error code and find it yourself. However, obviously having the phone connected is going to be more convenient because we can now just click on it and it brings you the troubleshooting steps right away. So I'll just click on this other error, H11452, and in this case my paper tray is empty. But again, if we had a paper jam, it would show you how to clear paper jam as far as the video goes or the description. Now again, the purpose of this is to kind of guide you down the right path of troubleshooting. Okay, so when I say before that this app is kind of a mixture of service mode and GSPN, we still do need to kind of mix the service manual in there as well as far as a resource, okay? So even though this has quite a bit of functionality, it's not the end-all be-all, but it is quite functional, and it is very, very helpful and useful in your troubleshooting. And we're going to see some of the other options we have in here as we move through. So looking at the next option here, we have Lookup Action. Now this Lookup Action allows us to find, as it sees here, service bulletin retrieval, service manual retrieval, search appliance development view. That's just a very wordy way of saying the parts list, right? So you can download the parts catalog right to your phone right now. Useful tips are kind of like service bulletins, troubleshooting guides, also more like service bulletins and so forth. So a lot of great info here. So in this case, I'm just going to choose service bulletin retrieval. Now you notice there, and I'm not sure if on your view on your screens how clear it is, but you'll see that it automatically populates the model, the SL-X4220RX. And again, as you notice here, I can type in the number on my own, the model number, so I don't need to be connected. Just having it connected auto-populates that field. As I scroll down, if you happen to know the title, you can type that in. If you happen to know the doc number, you can type that in as well. Odds are, you don't know the title or the doc number, or you wouldn't be here in the first place. So what I like to do is I like to search by a period. So I'm just going to drop this back to December of 2013 as my starting point in that left field, and then on the right is basically today's date. as far as those two date fields. Now, you need to be careful about this, because I've caught myself doing this as well, where I just simply forget to choose a date range. And then I don't see any service bulletins in there, and I kind of lose my mind a little bit, you know? So always make sure that we have the appropriate date range in there. Keep in mind that if we're working on a machine that maybe wasn't manufactured for 2 years or so, that we may not have had too many bulletins over the last 2 years. So again, you want to make sure that the date range kind of coincides with the life of the machine. And that way you can now have a much more pointed search for your service bulletins and tech tips and such. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit search on my search screen here. And away it goes. Now, this is a newer machine, so I'm not expecting too many bulletins for it. So here we are. We have a faxing issue that came up. Looks like we have a black screen and toner remains. I'm just going to click on this one. Again, in this case, it's a firmware-related problem. It says if you just update the firmware, you should be good to go. But now if you look here, if you look a little bit lower, I can now, in the file attachment, I have the guide itself, where I can click on this to download it to my phone. Again, and it's downloading, and there it is. So now I can view the service bulletin right on my phone. Again, don't forget when it comes to these Excel files that there's different tabs involved, so we ensure that we are looking at that. But how convenient is this? The ability to just start downloading service bulletins and manuals and troubleshooting guides and tips right to your smartphone. Okay? I know you've all been in a situation, especially for you field technicians out there, where you're out in front of a machine, you think to yourself, let me call the help desk, or let me go back to the office and research this a little bit. Now you can save yourself so much time, and you can be much more efficient in the time required to troubleshoot our devices simply by using this app. So if it is a service bulletin or you do need firmware, now you can do some quick investigation. And now you have that app, that bulletin right on your phone. So now you can email it out to a fellow technician, save them time. You have the images and everything else in there. So again, right there, huge convenience. And this is what I mean by it being a mixture of GSPN and service mode, right? Now, we haven't gotten to the service mode part yet, but that's coming a little bit later. So we can see that bulletin. Now, just as another example, I'm going to go back into my search screen. I'm just going to type in a common model. Let's just say a CLX-8640. Again, notice how it auto-populates. I'm just going to leave the same date range, and I'm going to hit search. We can see here, here's a fuser guide. I was talking about a change in this particular machine, how we changed the transfer. And look here, we have a new side cover design and things like that. So again, we can now pull this information, download the bulletin right to your phone, and away you go. Same thing goes for the service manuals, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and click on my service manual. And I'm purposely going to pick a smaller, lower-end machine because the manual will simply be smaller and quicker to download for the purposes of this training. So I'm just going to type in CLP, and you notice we have a quick population there. So I'm just going to choose the CLP 325. Again, notice the date range matters. So because this is an older unit, I'm just going to put a big span on that date range and search. And there's our manual. So I can click on that, pull my server data, and just like that, you'll notice service manual as well as the parts catalog right there in this particular view. And now if we need to go do a little more in-depth troubleshooting, do a little more research on specifications and things of that sort, or if we just want to find a part number, we can now find all that information and we have it right at our fingertips. Again, as I say this and as I demonstrate this, I'll bet you're all kind of thinking about scenarios where you would have loved to have had this at some point in the past. So that's where we can use our service manuals. Again, search appliance development view, that is basically just the parts catalog. So in the same breath, we're typing in the part number, the model code rather, typing in a date range, and we're going to hit search. And there's some of our parts catalogs here, so I can just choose that, and it'll download it right to my phone, as we said, once I click on the file. Again, the file might take a little longer to download depending on the size of it, the number of megabytes, and things of that nature. So as this downloads, we can now think about all these great little wrinkles to the app right in the palm of your hand. Now again, there's also some other great resources in there that you don't typically find on GSPN. So you might see that troubleshooting guide that was in that list, or useful tips. Those things, sometimes they have stuff in there, the engineers post, that didn't make it to GSPN for one reason or another. So again, we have a really nice utility here. Now, once that parts catalog stops downloading, I'll pop back out of it and I'll show you some of those troubleshooting guides and tips. Now, in the event you know, that you don't want to wait for something to download, the one catch to that is that you can't just back out of the app, right? You can't just hit the little back button on your smartphone. So if it's downloading, let's say it's a larger file, you're actually going to have to force stop the app in order to kill the download. So that's just one of the little catches to the app. Again, this app is ever changing. So, you know, some of the little quirks and things that come up will be ironed out over time. There's one or two pieces of functionality that are only going to be available to me as a Samsung employee and other Samsung employees. So keep that in mind as well if it says you don't have the rights for a certain function. All right, and I'm just thinking about little odds and ends to consider with the app. All right. Now in this case, just for the sake of time, I'm just going to back out of the app and I'm just going to kill it just to, you know, spare us the time to download it. So again, to do that, again, I'm on a Samsung Galaxy S5. Just go to your application manager, locate the SPDS app. It's in here somewhere, there we go, and just force stop. Now, of course, the download won't go through, right? So we need to remember that. But at the very least, it's not going to hold you up as far as waiting for that download. Now also, again, as we just as a refresher, I'm going to choose on the go. And notice now, I don't have to input that customer information again. Now it's just saying, hey, this is what the information is. So I'm just going to confirm that, hit yes. And we're back in. So we were under lookup action. So I just want to take a look at maybe those useful tips, just to give you an idea of the types of things you can find in there. So again, I'm going to change my date range. Very important to make sure you do that. I've caught myself so many times. So in this case, this is talking about internal packet capture guide for this particular machine. It's a new feature in service mode. A little rundown here on the latest firmware, telling you what the latest version is, right? So just little useful pieces of information that we have for that. Whereas the troubleshooting guide is a little more in-depth. And that gives you a little more in the way of technical information, true troubleshooting info, and potential suggestions, right? So remaining toner or if received fax cannot be printed. Notice for active NFC option kit. So I'll just select that NFC option kit here. And it's going to take us talk about a little bit about setting it up and what we need to use for this particular machine. So there's a lot of interesting, you know, little things here. Here's another one, cyan toner supply error, toner leakage, again for this particular machine. I'm not familiar with this particular error, so this must be not as common as others. And that's what you really need to consider with this troubleshooting guide, is that it's for those less common issues that maybe one customer experienced a few instances of it. So it was a couple of instances, but it only really happened with that one customer. Those types of things end up in the troubleshooting guide, right? So it's not necessarily a full-on factory bolt-in, something that we can expect to see on multiple machines, but it's just more of a suggestion of, hey, if you happen to come across this, take a look at that, right? So just that troubleshooting guide is for those kind of one-off things, which in the end, that's really where we want to check out, right? Those one-off issues, right? Because the widespread issues are typically known and, you know, there's a known fix. So definitely make sure that as we're going through our troubleshooting, that we are looking through all of those resources available in that lookup action menu. And you'll be surprised at the amount of information and data and usefulness of what you have in there will be. Again, very, very powerful what we can do with this. And this is, again, that mixture of GSPN that I was talking about. All right. So let's get back to the big screen here. All right. So there it is. Search community, that is still in the early phases, so we're not really using that just yet. But if somebody had posted a topic about this particular issue, it would show that. Again, I'm not sure if that's going to be active here in the United States. And also we have technical info sheets. So if we just need some technical information about the device, in this case it's not downloading, so this part might not be up. So this might be one of those little wrinkles that is going to be ironed out over time. Now the next thing we see here under the error menu is Lookup History. So now I can look up device connection history. So by clicking on that, I can now see all the activity and the connections that a previous technician has done. So now if you want to know what your coworker may have done the last time they were out, and now you can just simply plug into the app and you can see the types of motor tests and the types of bulletins and the types of things that the machine has done. So again, here is Lookup Device Connection History. Right, so in this case there's not much because this is the first time I've connected to the machine. Again, model specific history, so we can see now anybody who's connected to this particular model, we can see that history across all information. Right? So some of these things will show all data for all technicians out there. Model specific history, right? Again, the connection history and so forth. So a lot of useful information there. Again, request statistics is specifically for administrators, so that's something that you would not have access to. And then there's also the movie menu, which again in this case is not going to, there we go. So for this particular machine you can see we have installation videos. We could see how to install the base, install consumables, things of that nature. Again, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to download that to save. So obviously you're welcome to all practice using that and playing around with it. But again, a lot of very helpful info in there. So that's our error list. Now, so that's where we can actually, do some investigating on the issue at hand. Now let's move on to diagnosis. Now diagnosis is where service mode starts to filter in. So with this diagnosis, I can run motor tests or clutch tests, sensor tests, things of that sort. And again, similar to what we have in our service mode. But this is really great for those machines that don't have a regular service mode. And now I'm talking about those really low-end models, little $100 laser printers that may not have an LCD that we can actually connect to and view tests and things that we're doing. But now I can do that with this in a nice, handy application. So just as an example, I'm going to choose a motor test. And I'm just going to choose my main motor, and I'm just going to hit start. Oh, machine might be asleep. Let me just wake it up real quick. Again, you do need to make sure that device is awake. So you might hear the device initializing right now. All right, and again, the device is still waking up, so we'll give it a second to catch up. But when we run that test now, we're listening for, that motor turn. This might be better suited to run if you have the cover off of the machine. So if the cover's off, you can now see the motor turning, or you can see that clutch or actuator firing, and you can feel that tick of it. What we can also do is we can take this a step further, and we can hook up a meter to that harness of that motor. So when we run the motor test, I can now meter and make sure that I have a signal coming off of that harness. And that way we can confirm if it's a signal issue or a motor issue, right? So just a little side note on that troubleshooting. But again, we can run all these different tests and functions for motors, clutches, sensors, all sorts of things. So let's get back to that big screen view of the phone here, and let's see if the app, now that it's fully woken up. There we go. Now, I'm not sure if you guys can hear that on your end, but it fires that motor up. And what's great about this is that it doesn't run the test continuously, meaning it stops after a few seconds, right? So for those of you who are familiar with our service mode and running some of those motors and clutch tests, they don't stop if you start them. They just keep running. So with this now, it just runs that test for a few seconds, right? Avoiding that overrun, potential excessive wear on whatever drive component. And again, there's a nice little safety measure to prevent any over-rotating of, of motors and drive components. Same thing goes for, if you look at some of the rest of the tests here, you could see this is a color box. So there's all 4 colors and, exit motor, duplex, and so on. If I go back to diagnostics, notice there's clutch and actuators, so I can activate feed clutches. Paper handling is where our sensor tests are. Now, when it comes to these sensor tests, when you run the test, let's just say I'm going to choose my, while I have you up on the big screen here, I'm just going to choose a basic feed sensor test. Hold on, why is that not coming up? There we go. I'll give it a second. I think it's just backed up a little bit. All right, not sure why that's not opening. This could be a result of it. There we go. So there's our feed sensor test. Now notice you see the status high and low. So that's going to be your indicator of its state. Now when you hit refresh, that little refresh icon in the upper right, that little circular arrow icon, you're going to need to hit that whenever you actuate that sensor. Okay, so if you're testing a sensor, you need to check the state on the screen on the phone. Then you need to lift that sensor or flag it, maybe put a little paper over it or something. Then you need to hit refresh on the phone while you're holding that sensor. So it's not actual real time. Again, just want to be careful about that. Sometimes what you might also notice is that there might be a delay in that response depending on the machine and the processor it has and everything else. So in the end, you just got to be aware of that little point and make sure that we are hitting that little refresh icon before and after we've activated that particular sensor. But again, now we can confirm that that particular sensor is or isn't working. And again, this idea permeates throughout all the other tests that we can run. So I'll just back out of that and we can see some of the other things we can do. Again, as we scroll, consumables, right, waste toner install, transfer, this, test your eraser lamp, that kind of thing. Fuser tests, I think you're starting to get the idea. We can also run a shading test from this if you'd like. Again, the shading test is for checking scanning issues. Again, for those of you who have been in our A3 classes and deal with our BTA models, you should be familiar with this shading test. It's definitely reviewed in class, and again, a very helpful thing to make sure that our white balance is in check. So that's our diagnosis, right? That's our tests and our checks that we can run on this machine to now determine what the faulty part might be. Next option we have there is our test option. Now this test option is great because it gives us patterns that we never had built into the machine before. So if you notice here, the pattern print, there's a few of them. We have a 5% page fill pattern. So if you have a customer that's complaining that their toner's running out too fast, now we can run a 5% pattern so that they can see what 5% page fill looks like. All right? Again, very, very useful. We can do full color test patterns. So I can just do a cyan pattern. Now make sure, as we go through this, before you hit print, that you are choosing this proper size for the machine. It defaults to A4. So make sure that you are choosing letter or ledger. So in this case, I am just going to choose a cyan test pattern. And again, it's downloading the file from the web server. And in a moment, it will process the job. Now, while we're waiting on that, just kind of another note on this. So with those patterns, again, we saw a few of those in there. We had the 5% page fill pattern. We have the cyan pattern, which is going to come out in just a moment. We can also do full page test patterns. So now I can, now I can do a full page, 100% page fill. So now if I'm trying to track down a reoccurring defect on a drum or potentially developer unit or whatever, I can do so. And I can do that for any machine that I connect this application to. Now in this case, and I'm just going to reach over to my printer off camera, this is my cyan test page. We can also do a full page of that. So I'll send that one out as well. So I'll just go solid pattern cyan and hit print. And away it goes. So while that comes out, again, we'll give it a second. Now, as this comes out now, we can now see, are we getting good page fill? Are we getting good, solid, even transfer? Are we getting even color registration around, or margins around the machine? Right? It's very, very useful, and we can do this for all 4 colors. Now let's get back to the app. So those are our test patterns. Now the last one that's really nice is the printing white paper. Now printing white paper is basically a feed test. So let's say we have some contamination in the engine, right? Maybe there's some toner dusting or something, and it gets on the rollers, all into the machine. Now, for those of you who've had to clean a machine out after this type of thing happens, it's not a very fun deal. So what we can actually do is we can run just plain white sheets through the machine in an effort to either, number one, potentially clean off rollers and things of that sort as a cleaning function, but also for trying to track down a jamming issue, a dog earring issue, that kind of thing. So now it's just going to feed white sheets of paper, just plain white paper without any imaging. Again, so now we can also track down if that defect is related to dusting, or maybe the fuser has a divot on it, and maybe that divot will present itself when we don't have imaged data on the document. So again, a lot of ways we can use this in real-world environments, as well as with jams and things of that sort. Now, if we look at the go back to the big screen there, to the phone screen, there we are. I can now choose a certain number of pages, so I can do a 1 or 2 page run, or I can do a 100-page run and really kind of, send that paper through. And you'll notice that when I choose different tests, that number of prints goes away, right? Also with this print white paper, notice I can go duplex. So I can do a full-on duplex test of this without wasting toner. Right, so really, really helpful here. A lot of ways we can use these various tests in our day-to-day activities. In fact, you're probably thinking of a couple scenarios where it could have come in handy right now. All right, so that's our test and our test patterns. Next thing I want to look at is our information. Now, information is, well, I guess it's just that. So notice when I click configuration, notice information for the configuration, and it shows you serial number, date of installation, and so forth. And then when you hit print, it prints out the configuration sheet, the standard machine configuration sheet, right? So it's not printing what we're seeing on the phone screen, it's actually printing whatever the machine's config sheet is. That same idea goes for the consumables, right? So when I print this out, it prints out my supplies report. And again, we see all of our toner and drum information, right? So again, really, really handy. Network, more of the same. I can print out my network configuration page. Fax report, of course, this is not supported for this particular printer because I don't have a fax card in this machine. So the fax report is not available. And then finally, we have tech mode. Now, what this actually tells you is how to get into tech mode on the UI of the machine. So in the case of this machine, it has a tablet user interface. So the instructions are to hold the soft power key and then hit the pop-up box to get into service mode. But if you're on a machine that doesn't have, let's say it's a lower end product, that, that has a certain keystroke sequence to get into service mode, or maybe it doesn't have a touchpad or an actual keypad, maybe it's just kind of that little circular kind of navigation wheel. And you don't quite remember how to get into service mode. Is it up, down, left, right? Is it menu? Is it back? However it is. So now here we can now get into service mode on those machines, and we have those entry procedures. Now again, in this case of this device, it auto-populated the entry procedures because I was connected using the on-the-go cable. But we can easily just search that field at the very top, and if we could just go back to the phone screen for a second. Thank you. If you look there at the top now, I can type in, and I'll just purposely pick a low-end machine. Let's go SL-M, and I'll just pick a 2620, and I'll hit search. Now, in this case, if it's blank, that might be because the machine itself does not have an on-screen service mode because the machine does not have a display. So let's see if we can find maybe a better machine. There we are, 3820DW. And it looks like it's not populating for this, so they may not have updated that for this machine. Okay, so they may not have updated that for that particular device. But again, that's the expectation of what we can expect to see in there. So that's the information tab, right? Just printing reports, printing the standard reports that the machine comes with, and ensuring that we, we can have that data for escalation purposes. Finally, we have the Service tab. Now, what this Service tab allows us to do is, as you see there, is cloning. So I can now use this feature to export machine settings right to my phone, and then I can push them to another device. Now, a couple of things we got to be aware of here when we're dealing with this. Number one, if you export those settings, you must not leave that screen we were just on. So if you hit that export button and then back out of the app, you're losing that export data, right? So you have to keep that screen open before you import it to the next device. But this is really handy because if we ever have to do a memory clear on a machine, which I know you've all done it at some point in time, you know, a memory clear, or if we just want to maybe connect this machine, you know, transfer those settings to another device. Now, as far as transferring to another device, that's something that doesn't have 100% capability right now. This is really meant more for if you're replacing a main board, right? That's really the main point of this, is if you're replacing the main board of a machine, or you know, if you know, you have to do a memory clear, something to that nature, right? But the key here is to make sure that we keep that screen open. Otherwise, whatever settings that you backed up go away, right? So fair heads up on that. So that's our importing and exporting feature. What you also notice here is send debug log. I really, really like this one. So the debug log here is, and again, the debug log applies to our BTA models, okay? So for those of you on the BTA dealer side of life, you probably are all familiar with the debug log. I've heard it talked about as far as escalation purposes. So what this debug log will now allow us to do is we can now download that debug log right to our phone, right? So again, it's one-stop shopping. You don't have to hop into service mode to download it to a thumb drive, which there's nothing wrong with that if you want to. But now we can download it right to our phone, and now you can just hook your phone up to your computer and copy and paste it, and now we can escalate. So again, another nice little convenience there. Finally, what we have is our device settings. Now in here you could see IP settings. I can now configure the IP address of my machine just by pushing it. Now the last thing that I want to look at, so now I can set up my connectivity. How we can use this without a connection. So we'll go use without connection. And at this point I can disconnect my USB cable. And now you see no connect. So when I hit this, I can still look up a device error, right? So I could just have to type in the error myself. Lookup action, right? Same story. I can look up service bulletins and everything just by typing in the model code, right? And you know, 3185, and now I can look up bulletins for that. And I don't need to be connected. So if you don't happen to have a USB on the go cable, can you see the bulletins there? So if you don't happen to have an on-the-go cable, this app is still very, very useful in its capabilities. So you have all that. Again, lookup device, lookup history, tech tips, useful tips, and so forth. And then there's also information, which if you notice information, it's just that tech mode screen which shows you how to get into tech mode. Right. So if I type in, you know, SCX 4828, there we are. There it is. And that's how you can get into tech mode, right? So that's an example of that. Now, once all this is done, right, once you've connected and everything and you go to exit the app, you're going to be prompted to upload the data. Now, this is something that I have to be connected for, so let me see if I can try this connection again. Make sure that my USBs are all connected solidly here. Okay, yeah, I definitely have a connectivity problem here. I may have damaged my USB port. All right, so yeah, we're just going to have to discuss this one then. So with the it's part of a live training, with that app, when you exit the app, you're going to notice that it's going to ask you for what you did. It's going to ask you what part you want to replace. It's going to ask you, you know, for any comments or notes, and then you would hit OK. Now when you hit OK and then you exit the app, that information comes to us. So now we can use that for service tracking. If you have a fix for something that maybe we never thought of, we can now look at that data and we can use that fix, and maybe it'll end up being a bulletin or a tech tip. Right? So very, very useful there. But again, a really, really useful app. Now that pretty much concludes everything to cover in the SPDS. Now what I'd like to do for you guys is open it up to some questions. So we do have that chat-based Q&A, so I'm just going to bring up my chat box here. All right, so I have a few questions already listed in here, so I'll just kind of go down the line of these various questions. So, do you see SPDS version that doesn't require a SIM card? Okay, so again, that's referring back to only phones, right? So as it is today, we must have a device that has a SIM card in it, right? So that's one of the restrictions on this. I know they are discussing tablets, so that's something that may be coming down the road. But as it is today, it must be a phone that we're using. Another good question here, can you update firmware with the app? And the answer is no. That was something that was part of the original discussions, but the thing is that whenever you have a wireless connection and you're downloading firmware as well as the cable, there's a potential for disaster there. So I know they were talking about it, but it's not something that we can expect to see in the app, right? So no firmware update as it is today. Now, that doesn't mean a year from now, as they kind of fine-tune the application, that maybe they'll add it. But as of right now, there is no plan for firmware update. Let's see. The question was, can you print 5% patterns? So I think we were able to handle that one with the 5% pattern built into the machine. Let's see. Looking at some others. Looking at the other questions. Again, please keep the questions coming. I want to make sure that we're adjusting, we're hitting the questions you want. Okay, so another good question here is, what if you ever need to change that person info? Again, that's referring to, I guess I assume the information about the customer, right? Again, Jane, if you want to chime in and confirm that, but that sounds to me like the customer information. So when we logged in and we saw, how I put Samsung in training as tagging to that particular machine, well, what happens if that machine leaves that customer site? Well, when you log in with the app, you can just simply hit that no button that we have in there as far as the customer information, and that will then give you the opportunity to change whatever that is, right? So whatever associated email or whatever company name or what have you. Now that actually reminds me of another point. That email address that you plug in to associate with the machine, you will receive an email. That email address will receive an email whenever somebody connects to that device, connects to through the SPDS app. All right, so that will serve as a notification. So also keep that in mind as far as the customer's information being there. Right, you might not want the customer getting an email notification every time that somebody connects to the SPDS app. So I'll leave that up to you and how you want to handle that. The main thing is that I want to make sure you understand what that is and what it does and how that email might be used. All right, so again, we got some really good questions coming here. Okay. Is there any way to cache these files ahead of time when on Wi-Fi? And the answer is yes. Just simply download the file when you're on a Wi-Fi connection, and now, as long as you don't move them from the folder that they download to, you can now access them as just from the phone itself. Just don't move them from where they're downloaded from, and you'll be okay. Right, so if you are on Wi-Fi, you can save some of your data usage by simply accessing some of these documents and everything when you're on a Wi-Fi connection. Again, a lot of great questions coming in. Again, another question, can't you cancel from clicking on the downloading file? Unfortunately, within the app itself, again, talking about downloading a bulletin or a video, there is no cancel function of that download within the SPDS app. Now, that is actually very good feedback and something that I'm going to provide to the application developer over in Korea. So I will submit that as a suggestion. I think it's a great suggestion. I would totally agree with you. And we'll see if that's something that they can add. Okay. Again, somebody says that their version of the app shows download firmware. Again, I wouldn't expect the firmware download capability on the app. They may add it. It may even be part of that update that I didn't apply earlier. But you know, again, I would not expect a firmware update capability there. At least not even widespread, right? So we'll just have a wait and see approach on that because the app is fairly new. Let's see. Doesn't require a SIM card. Okay. Again, do you see SPDS version that doesn't require a SIM card? Right, we talked about that. Talked about firmware, talked about the test pattern. Okay. Question I have here is if I'm using the app to get, you know, to get used to working with it, how should I identify the session when closing it? That's actually a great question, Trish. So the question is, let's just say you're practicing the app, right? You're just practicing, you know, running the motor tests and downloading files and things of that nature. What we ask you to do when you exit the app, talking about those comments, just put in testing or training as the comments in the app when you do that exit, right? So that's just what we ask you to do to ensure that we can kind of, you know, distinguish between actual troubleshooting and just getting familiar with the application, right? Again, love this. A lot of great questions. Let's see. The machine. Okay, so when you use the test mode in the apps, does it click against the machine? And actually it does. It will affect your meter count, but in the end, even if it was built into the machine, it would still affect your meter count. So it would just show up as a test report rather than an actual copy or a print, right? So it will count on the clicks against the machine, just like any other test page that you might print from the machine. Let's see here. Mike, question from Mike. It says, when I log in, notification awaiting approval. Again, it might take some time for your approval to come through. Usually, again, this is one of the viewers is waiting approval, so that just means that nobody's approved him yet. Again, that's I'm tied up in the session, so I can't do it. So again, just kind of little things to think about. But typically, you can expect a you know, a notification on that within an hour of registering. Another question I have, are there plans to allow multiple device access in the future? So if I can understand that question right, Clint, you're asking if I can have two devices connected at once. If you wouldn't mind sounding off in the chat screen to, you know, just to make sure that I understand the question. So I'll wait for that quick response and I'll come back to that. But in short, if that's the way I understand it, where connecting one phone to multiple devices to troubleshoot, that is not part of the plans. Okay, if that's the question. So that's not part of the plans as of today. All right. Another question I have here is, can I input machine serial number when the main board is replaced? So there actually is a serial number writing option in there. I don't think it's going to be active for you guys because they typically try to protect serial numbers. So that's something that, again, at this stage is not going to be a direct usable function. But that's something that, let's give it a little bit of time. You know, that's something that we'll definitely have some clarification on. But as of right now, the point of that serial number writing function is if you replace the main board on a device that doesn't have an MSOK chip, where the serial number is embedded in the main board, we can now write that serial number. But again, I think that might be administrative. So that's one thing I have to follow up on and check out. Let's see. Wow, yeah, a lot of questions coming in. Here we are. A question I have, any chance we can upload the debug log directly to Samsung? And that's actually part of the feature. So for you BTA guys out there, BTA dealers, that send debug log option, you can actually send it directly to a Samsung server, where you have a choice in that debug log section of uploading it to a Samsung server or to write to your phone. However, again, those debug logs can get very, very large, and this goes back to those data charges. So as of right now, I would highly recommend using the the phone version of that, where you save it to your phone and then you copy it, you know, copy it to your computer as a result. That would be my recommendation for now, as far as the debug log goes. Let's see. Another question I have, can you set a static DNS from the app? And the answer is no. Only basic IP information, right? So only what you see in that little network settings option is what you have there. So no DNS info there. Here we are. Again, just looking at some of these other here. Give me a moment. Okay, so a question I have here, is there a manual with the setup instructions and procedure? So yes, there is. Actually, so what I'll be doing is after this session, I will be blasting an email out to everybody with a basic manual for this SPDS app. So that'll just go to everybody who's been part of this live session, and then of course you'll have it and you're free to distribute within your organization. Here we are. Question, can I use the app on a tablet besides Android? And again, the answer is no. You can only use it on a Droid smartphone. Again, a phone specifically. Again, another question here. Can we review the training video again? The answer is yes. This training video is being recorded, so there will be some minor edits to it. And you can certainly log on in the future and view it at any point in time. So that will be available. Another question I have is, will there be another session when the iOS version is released? And it's actually a very good question, Ann. Honestly, it really depends on how different the iOS version is. So as it is today, I'm expecting the iPhone version to be very, very similar, if not identical, to the Droid version. However, if once we get that iPhone version out, if it does turn out to be much more different than the regular app, then yes, we will have a dedicated training for the iPhone flavor of it. But right now, I have the expectation and I have the confidence that the iPhone version will be virtually identical, save a couple of slight Apple-related little button and menu structures, but overall I expect it to be pretty much the same. But if it is incredibly different, there will be a dedicated training for the iPhone version. Okay, again, another good question. Can the app only be used with a Samsung smartphone? And the answer is actually no, actually. You can use it with any Droid-based device. So the limitation is a Droid-based smartphone. So the limitation is not on the actual manufacturer. So you can use any Droid-based smartphone as long as the Droid version is Ice Cream Sandwich, that is 4.0 or higher. Let's see. Another one here. Again, just a friendly reminder, no firmware update capability. And again, yes, the video can be viewed at a later time. So again, a lot of really good questions we had coming in here. One last question I have here from one of our sales guys is there a connection specifically for the Note? So if you have a Note smartphone. And in the end, it's just a Note on-the-go cable. So if there's an on-the-go cable capability for the Note, for the Galaxy Note smartphone, then yes, you can use that. But it's really just depends on if that specific cable is available. I've only ever personally tested it on a standard phone, but it should work on a Galaxy Note as well. I know we have a few guys out there using that, so it should be okay on that. All right, so we ran a little bit longer than I anticipated. So at this point, I think we are good to go. Again, unless we have any other questions here. Oh, I have another question here. What happens when it states no partner ID available? So that's referring to when you register. That partner ID is a Samsung ASC number. So if your partner ID isn't registered, you need to contact your service manager or your Samsung regional service manager to find out what the story is with that ASC account number. All right, so that's what that partner ID refers to. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and finish on that. So again, I appreciate you all for taking some time. We did run a little later than expected, so I apologize, but I hope you found it very useful and beneficial, and should be very, very good for you when you're troubleshooting for, devices out in the field. And again, I thank you for your time, and you all have a great weekend.